Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 140 of the RRBG podcast. This episode is brought to you by our friends in Thunderking Coffee. Due to the current pandemic, all the promo codes have been canceled. However, Thunderking Coffee has decided to sell their coffee at wholesale price, which is a steal. It's much better than the discount you were getting with our code. So go to their website, thunderkingcoffee.com, and support independent businesses. They're going through a hard time right now. We're all going through a hard time, but if we're able to support each other, I think we can get through this. This episode is also brought to you by our friends in Saints Joints. They make the best pre-roll joint packages available in the market, currently selling out of California, Washington, and Oklahoma. If you don't see it at your local dispensary, make sure you ask for it. And check out their website, saintsjoints.com, to support by picking up some merch, some t-shirts, and some other products. And finally, this episode is brought to you by our friends in Hella Hot Sauce, making some of the best craft hot sauce you can find in collaboration with bands like Hatebreed and Gwar. Like everybody else, struggling through this time, unable to have their doors open, so anything helps. Go to their website, hellahotsauce.com, and pick up some hot sauce. Stay safe and stay clean, people. In this episode, it's the return of Liam Wilson. We had Liam on in episode 3, all the way back then when I had no idea what I was doing. The audio was terrible, and we had a great conversation, so I decided to put it out anyway. But this time, we got together, clear audio. We had a conversation about his project Azusa. We talked about him playing with Devin Townsend on the road. We talked a little bit about the aftermath of Dillinger Escape Plan. And then we got into a lot of talking about Ram Dass and yoga and meditation, the transcendental meditation that he's practicing. It was really, really great to reconnect with him. And I hope you guys enjoy it. Pick up the Azusa album and follow him on social media. Cheers.
Eddie.
Liam.
How you doing, man?
Doing good, brother. How are you?
I never had it so good.
Never had it so good. I like to hear that.
Right? Feels good to say
it. Welcome back to the podcast. I mean, this is something I've been wanting to do for 3 years.
Yeah, we've gone back and forth a lot, and I've certainly not been avoiding it, but for whatever reason, it just doesn't seem to line up. And, in this Mercury retrograde that we're experiencing, somehow these planets have aligned in a more auspicious configuration.
Oh,
and here we are.
With proper equipment, it doesn't sound like shit this time.
You mean my AirPods are working? These pros are really that pro?
Nice. Yeah. I mean, dude, you were on episode 3. I had no idea what I was doing. I had like the worst equipment. You sounded like you were coming out of a distortion pedal. It was amazing.
That's good. I hope, maybe one of these, I don't know. I'm not going to name drop some of my endorsed pedals, but yeah.
Fuzz Roche's pedals, friends
it was,
of the podcast.
It was a dark glass BK7, yeah.
But man, I'm glad we're doing this. How have you been? First and foremost, how have you been? Because we haven't talked on the podcast since, but how have you been post DEP, all of that?
I mean, I could go high or I could go low. Yeah, I mean, in general, I am great, like I said. I mean, there's so much. I could tease out so much here, man. And I don't even really know where to start. I mean, I've been pretty busy musically. My life is definitely different. But
you're not on the road constantly.
No. The more things change, the more they stay the same. And I'm, you know what? I'm realizing that I may have left a scarf somewhere, but that is neither here nor there. I will figure that out.
We have to stop the podcast. Stop everything. Go find the scarf. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I'm just like, oh man, I always do this. No, man. I mean, I'm good. I'm super busy in most ways. I have been working at a metal sculpture foundry, welding statues and things like that together. I'm an art school dropout, and it's nice to kind of get back into like a crafty shop environment and kind of dive back into making or help make three-dimensional art again. I've got Azusa, which is kind of keeping me musically stimulated.
You guys just did a tour with Contortionist, right?
We did, and that was pretty rad. It was great to kind of get out there, and playing live is kind of like the final brushstroke, and it feels good to kind of just be able to put that theory to practice, so to speak. It's one thing to record the stuff. It's another thing to actually get out there and play it, for myself to just be like, yo, okay, this is happening in real time and I only get one take as opposed to, a few. And, just to get to know my band more personally in that way. And for us to kind of all gel in a different way. And kind of, the push and pull is different when you're, with each other 24/7 for weeks straight. And seeing where personalities clash and where they really gel. And it's just an interesting situation to put any group of humans into. And, it was fun. I would totally, I would do it again in a heartbeat, man. I look forward to having a chance to do it again. And then now I'm kind of deep in the woodshed, so to speak, trying to just dig through this Devin Townsend material.
I read some rumors online that you're doing that. You're taking on bass duties for a certain leg of the tour.
Yeah, it sounds like, at least the summer festivals, I'm pretty sure it's not a permanent position, but it sounds like for some of the more heavier Devin and strapping on lad material, he, wants me in the band, and I'm happy to be of service. And, I thank Wes Hawk for, kind of dropping my name at a critical time. And
nice. Yeah, I was about to ask, how did that even happen? Like, how'd you get that call?
I've met Devin a couple times, through, playing parallel shows with Dillinger. I know we did like Soundwave Festival together in Australia, and, can remember having a couple conversations, around that time. And I'm pretty sure he came out to see Dillinger once or twice in Vancouver. And I can recall at least one, just kind of, brief, but, go deep quick kind of conversations with him. And, and then I guess, Wes and I have kind of always teased at the idea of doing music stuff together. And, after the Dillinger thing, kind of shut its doors, I, kind of on like a, in many ways, just kind of detoxing from the experience. And, just kind of realizing that, I don't always need to be out on the road, and I don't always need to be doing that stuff, and I don't always need to swing at every pitch. And, and not to say that I don't still do it, but at least like trying to slow down, trying to remember that I have a life not on the road, trying to remember that I have responsibilities to my family that aren't just about making money or, that kind of stuff. Yeah. So, every time I talk to Wes, it's like, dude, your material is sick. I love you as a person. I would always want to do something with you, but I, for whatever reason, I just don't want to disappoint you. And I don't feel like it's the right time and place for me and you to get into that kind of deeper relationship. So anyway, I'm pretty sure that he was the person who name dropped me when Devin needed somebody. And I guess, Kyle from Bad Wolves had done some of the shows with him, and I'm not 100% sure, but from what I understand, he's just not available. And, my name came up, and here we are. And, as I had a quick conversation with Devin that, was like, hey, are you available? Cool. Great conversation. Before I say something stupid, let's get off the phone and I'll have my management talk to you. And,
Nice.
And as I was kind of hanging up, I get a text from Wes that was kind of like, something to the effect of like, my master plan to get on stage with you is finally, coming to fruition. I could just hear his like maniacal villain, moo-ha-ha-ha, kind of laugh
awesome.
through the text. And, yeah, I mean, he's a monster. And, Devin too, I'm super stoked and flattered and, happy to be of service. So.
Hell yeah, man. Hell yeah. I caught him at Red Rocks with Gojira and Opeth, Devin Townsend.
Nice.
And I had never seen him like as the Devin Townsend project live, and I was just blown away, dude. Because I mean, I've seen the videos and I've heard it, but being there, just like, whoa, okay, this is something else. And I had always, because he kind of falls in that world of like prog metal, like there's a whole group of fans that listen to prog metal that are just, they worship the guy, and they don't really like Dillinger. You know what I mean? Like I have a few friends that listen to Devin religiously, and they listen to like Scar Symmetry, stuff like that. And I'll bring up Dillinger, and they're like, "Nah, it's different. I'm not. It's too aggressive." But right. I always knew that Devin was a fan. Like, I mean, I know he had Greg on a song on one of those projects.
I'm pretty sure the song is "The Great Masturbator," something to that effect, and. Yeah, I mean, it's and I've as I'm kind of thinking back to my introduction with Devin, I'm pretty sure that he was on some James Murphy solo material. James Murphy from like Death and Obituary and Testament and Disincarnate with his band. That was probably my favorite death metal record of all time. So if I understand correctly, Devin performed on some of that material, and I didn't really realize that was Devin until recently. I was like, oh wait, my connection to him goes even further back.
Nice.
Because I'm pretty sure that was the first time I heard of him, or first time I've actually heard him perform was probably on that material. So.
That's crazy, dude. That's yeah. I mean, he's a very eclectic dude. Because the Strapping Young Lad stuff is very heavy, but then you listen to some of the like the Ziltoid stuff, and it's operatic, like space opera, kind of funky and weird, and but it's always technically sound. So I mean, I can imagine learning all these songs. How many songs are you learning for this tour?
I mean, he sent me about, I don't know, I'm going to say maybe a dozen so far.
Okay.
But I bet you that's maybe half. I'm going to guess that's about half of what I'm going to have to, chew through.
Okay. So, I mean, it's not a headlining tour. You guys aren't playing for like an hour. It's just festival tours, right? So
festival tours, some of those
minutes?
festivals. Yeah, I mean, a lot of those festivals are probably going to be some, some sprints. But I know we are headlining some of those festivals, so or at least some pretty high on that playbill or whatever. I'm forgetting the word I'm looking for, but I know we're pretty high up on some of that stuff, and so it wouldn't surprise me if we're pushing an hour, maybe 70 minutes here and there.
Nice.
TBD.
That's crazy, man. And so I think it all worked out magically for you because you had just done this tour with Azusa. You guys just put out that album not that long ago, right?
Yeah, we're following it up pretty quick. We were basically in the studio recording Loop of Yesterdays, which is quick plug. It's coming out April 14th or April 10th. We were already in the studio tracking that when Heavy Yoke came out. So, those Norwegians, they're quite prolific. Not messing around.
Awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously there's plans to do more touring with them, but what happens if like Devin's like, I love you, you're now permanent? Is that something you would consider, or you still want to do both?
I mean, I always kind of want to do, I wish I had more, I wish I had more than 2 feet to stick one in every door.
Right.
And, and I know like the Azusa family, they're, super happy for me. They're like, yeah, man, we get that might be, something that prevents this band from, doing more. But I think that everybody's just kind of, the rising tide floats all boats. Right. So if it brings if it brings me a bigger profile, they love and support me, and, just hope that it kind of sheds some light on the Azusa too. And, are happy just to kind of, see anyone's success. I think that less so in Dillinger, because we were all just kind of hungry and young and just kind of had that, like, I want to fuck everything that moves attitude about success and, all of that. Yeah. Azusa is a little bit more like victory lap. It's like, instead of being, Dillinger's like, let's go out and kill everyone. Let's have and Azusa was more like, let's go have fun. Let's go bring our music and share our gift and, make people happy. It was, not to say it's not any less serious, the intent, or the motivation is kind of different, but the, intensity is still there.
Right. No, I can imagine. I can imagine it being a kind of a relief, almost like, obviously I'm a fan, but it's got to feel good to not be like, it's not worried, but I guess it's just stressed out about just the performance with Dillinger, because it's such complex music, but also the performances are so intense and the crowds are crazy. And near the end, you had like the entire audience on stage. Like, that's got to be concerning for equipment. You know what I mean?
It's all of that. It's nice to kind of not necessarily, really it boils down to like, there's just less ego. There's not this like, I need to succeed or I need to be the best, bass player. It's kind of just like, no, man, I'm just trying to be the best Liam, or I'm just trying to be the best bass player in Azusa on this stage at this moment right now, and not worry about anything else. And I'm just trying to like be here with these people and enjoy my time with these people and not be living, I think if you live, if you think too much about your past, you suffer from some degree of depression. If you think too much about your future, you're suffering from some degree of anxiety. So, I'm just trying to be very much in the present right now. And, as it relates to, the hypothetical of Devin saying like, hey, we connect and let's, ride this out. I would just be, I'd be honored and flattered. And like I said, I'd be, if that's the way my dharma is rolling right now, then I'm happy to be of service. And, I'll take that one day at a time. And yeah, I don't know. I will say that I love where Devin is at in terms of his attitude about music and art. And, I listened to the Metal Sucks podcast he did, because as confirmed as some of this was, there's a certain element where it's just kind of like just a verbal confirmation.
Right.
And, all of a sudden I start getting all these, like, my phone starts going off, all these notifications, and I'm like, what just happened? I can feel my phone just like vibrating. And I see like people sending me a link to the Metal Sucks thing where it's like, dude, you're doing Devin, awesome. Cause I try not to, tell anybody so I don't jinx anything.
Right.
And I'm like, oh shit, this is happening. All right. And, I kind of lost my train of thought here, but
it's got to be exciting. It's one of those moments where something big
I remember
is happening,
what I was saying.
Okay,
yeah,
go ahead.
I was just saying that I listened to his podcast, where he brings this up and he kind of name drops me and talks about his lineup and everything. And just like the opening 30 minutes or so of, or just like the first section of this podcast, he's just talking about where he is and where he's come from, and just his attitude about this stuff, and just kind of how he's, just kind of raising the vibratory level of everything. And just where he's coming from, I just totally, relate and sympathize, and just kind of want to be in association of people like that. So, as much as I'd be, as much as I am just super excited about playing this material and getting on stage with, Wes and, and Krim, who I've never met, but sounds like a pretty colossal player in his own right.
Right.
I'm also really excited to be off stage and just like have an opportunity to like sit and talk to somebody who's, 10 years or so further down the path and has experienced all kinds of new stuff and just has this really fresh or like refreshing attitude about his music and his art and where he's at in his life. And it just sounds like, it's just all about, maybe I'm paraphrasing or putting words in his mouth, but it's just like, it's coming from a place of love, and there's so much kind of like hate and, and theatrics and ego and all this stuff, especially in metal. And I love that he's just coming from this completely different place, instead of having a bunch of like upside down crosses on stage, which is like a thing, he's got, everybody bringing stuffed animals and, and like donating them to a stage show. And I'm just like, dude, thank you for just, when everybody else is going high, you're going low. He's faking left and going right. I just really, at this point in my life and, it just all makes sense. And I'm really just, beyond excited to be in association with somebody like that.
That's fantastic, man. I'm happy for you. I know that you're that type of dude too. You're very open to love. You're into meditation and yoga, and you're a dude of love. And it's good to hear that you're being able to vibe on that level now. Because Dillinger, like it almost made sense to me because I'm a weirdo and I like polar opposites, and then like there's the center, obviously. So seeing you off stage with Dillinger was like, oh, this dude's awesome and he's very, heartwarming. And then he's on stage and it's murder. So it's kind of,
well, it's one of the things that I always think about is, I remember getting off stage with Dillinger and some random guy who was watching side stage was like, you guys need anger management. And I was like, that is anger management. Like, that's exactly what that was. And, I get to kind of, go slay the dragons or slay the demons up there and then come back and feel kind of refreshed about it. And, that was my way of kind of getting out that, that energy and working out that, whatever that is, and trying to curate it in a better way, and I don't know. It's kind of yoga off the mat, so to speak, or, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. The yoga thing is definitely like, I'm getting more and more into this kind of bhakti yoga thing, which is, everybody can kind of do. I think in the West, most people talk about yoga as in like a bunch of poses that you do. Mm-hmm. But that's only like one branch of the tree. And, that's really kind of trying to get you to a place, ultimately all those poses are just trying to get you to center yourself and focus on your breathing. It's not like it's a posture class where you focus on your breathing. It's a breathing class where you try to do these postures. Right. And, I'm just kind of getting to a point in my yoga practice where it's less and less about doing some poses and taking like a cool Instagram photo, because at the end of the day, like, maybe I can do a handstand or maybe I've got a 6-pack now, but if I'm still an asshole, then I'm not really doing it right,
Yep.
I mean, so I'm really trying, I'm really stoked on, dudes like Raghunath Kappa, who was just on Joe Rogan, talking about this bhakti yoga thing where it's just kind of more about devotional service and love and not judging people. And, he's got this, I don't know if it's his, monologue, but just kind of about how, the way I spin it is I've been thinking a lot about, let's like an Anthony Bourdain, let's say, as far as I'm concerned, that guy had everything the material world could offer him at an arm's reach and seemed to, at least on paper or superficially, kind of have everything that I feel like a lot of people want. That guy's got the coolest job. He's pretty handsome. He beat addiction. He's traveling the world. He's meeting all the cool people. He's in association with great people. His partner is aesthetically gorgeous. And, he seemed relatively happy, but deep down inside, something wasn't clicking, and he wasn't satisfied. And, and he went a certain way with that. You know, and then I take like the other fork in the road might be like a George Harrison, who, you know, also had pretty much everything the material world could offer him at arm's reach. Was a seeker, was out there, you know, experimenting with his consciousness, doing all this stuff, and was still not satisfied. And instead of going the low road, kind of was just like, okay, my sweet Lord. And I think it's just kind of an interesting idea to scratch at. And the way Raghunath Kapo talks about it is like, you know, everybody's kind of got this God-shaped hole in their soul. And I know that that's not necessarily like cool or hip to talk about. Right. But I do think that when I zoom out and look at the way the world is and the way that people act and what makes people, you know, something's missing. And I'm not sure what that is, but I'm willing to question whether it's that.
No, yeah. Look, you know, I think the yoga thing, like I practice yoga as well, different kinds. But I just do it on my own terms, my own pace. Like I tried like the DDP yoga thing, you know, and just when it becomes too regimented and weird, like it's a thing, I kind of I don't want to do it anymore. I want to do it my way. And right. I definitely feel that there needs to be more interest in people to look in themselves, in their minds, and finding that balance and that peace. Because, for example, like Anthony Bourdain, you brought him up, and, you know, people are like, I can't believe, why would he do that? You know, he had everything, right? But that God-shaped hole you're talking about, I honestly think it's something that you can work on yourself. Because when you're experiencing wonderful, crazy things like he was, and things that you would experience, for example, like, you know, crowd adulation. People love you. You go out, people want to take a picture with you. You know, you get to also go to these amazing locations across the world. Your brain is firing all these chemicals out, you know, happy chemicals. Like, holy shit, this is incredible. And then when you're home and you don't have that, it's your brain starts, like, it's depression. It brings you down. You're like, fuck, I miss that. It's kind of like a drug. You want to go back to it. And it's evident with social media too. Like they've had many TED Talks about that shit, where like every time you get on,
just your endorphins, you know,
right?
Yeah.
So imagine having those endorphins rushing nonstop, and then you don't have it. Those moments when you don't have it, and that's when the real depression kicks in. That's when yoga. That's when yoga should step in, right? That's when that balance of like, let me work on yourself, you know.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of it, you know, and you know, I'm glad that Dillinger had you know, a year, almost 2 years of knowing we were going to end before we actually ended, because it gave me a lot of time to really process. You know, it almost felt like one of those crash test dummy you know, things where you see the crash test dummies in slow motion, you know, or like, you know, at its worst, it felt like I was going to visit a dying part of my identity in the hospital every night we played a show. You know, and I have to like have this relationship or this kind of, you know, this interaction or this internal conversation with this part of what I identify with as kind of coming to an end. You know, so thankfully I had a lot of time to kind of check my ego a little bit before I hit that existential windshield. And, you know, realize that like, the more I identify this and the more I try to cling to it and the more expectations I have and the more I look to that for my like satisfaction or self-worth or happiness or freedom or whatever that thing is, the more I'm going to be disappointed, you know, essentially. And I needed to kind of try to, you know, figure out what it is that I'm really clinging to, or what it is that I think I'm losing, you know, and also kind of being like, you know, this isn't happening to me, this is happening for me. This band ending in some ways might be like hard on my bank account or hard on my ego or career or whatever you want to call, or even my, you know, my relationships with my friends who I look forward to seeing every 2 years or so. But then also kind of just trying to go in, you know, go deeper in and kind of be like, what is it about me that feels like I'm losing something, you know, and what am I gaining here? You know, I get to have more time with my family. I get to like go back to making art, the amount of things that I have backlogged and bucket listed and et cetera, because I had no time to do it or get started doing it between tours, or, the tours would be over and then all of a sudden we'd be in a writing cycle. And I'm just like, and I'm not saying that it was bad, I loved it, but there is a certain part of me that was, just kind of sitting at the bus stop, like waiting for that bus to come, and it wasn't coming.
Right. Well,
So,
I never thought of it that way when you mentioned that you did have like a year or so of knowing that it was ending, and it feels cathartic, kind of like when you visit a dying loved one at a hospital. Being there until the last moment is a little more, I guess, easy to digest than if it was an impactful, like out of nowhere car accident,
sure,
heart attack type of deal. Right?
Thankfully, it wasn't like we ended in a tragic way. It wasn't like, Led Zeppelin, John Bonham's dead, or Soundgarden, Chris Cornell's dead. That kind of thing would be, I think I would have a hard time, dealing with that. And, but yeah, I mean, having that moment, and then like every night, you'd be at certain you'd be in Poland, let's say, and some people would be like really emotional about like us playing our last song because this is probably the last time they're going to see it, and they just oh man, they're having this really pretty powerful moment, and I'm having a hard time connecting because it's not the last show for me. And I'm trying to give them that last show, but I know that I still have like 30 left in my dance card.
Right. That's got to be a weird feeling.
And it was like, oh man, I don't want to like disappoint you. And I kind of want to meet you on the level that you're at, but it's not where I'm at, and yeah, it was in so many ways, it was hard to, really, cause I want to give every show, it's like, I played every show like it was my last, but there's always this part of you that knows it isn't.
Yeah.
So, until that last one, and the last one was like its own, that was just a deeply almost psychedelic emotional nuke, and kind of really out of body. Like it's all those last three shows were like, there were moments where I'd have that like, imposter syndrome, or I'd feel really like, my mind and my intellect and my soul really separated in a way where I could kind of witness myself. I'd be looking at my hands playing and looking at the crowd and just being like, whoa, dude, check this shit out, and almost like not relating to the me that was, there was my body playing and my, my intellect driving it. And then there's my mind sitting in the passenger seat, just like, whoa. Wow, check this shit out. It was a really, like a kind of psychedelic, out of body, inner body experience that, I'll probably never fully touch again.
Well, never say never, obviously, but yeah.
Well, I mean, it'll never quite be like that. It'll never be like that. It was like, I just got this like, big heroic dose of that. And my first time really tasting it like that, like, I don't know. I mean, even if Dillinger were to get back on stage and then have another final show, it'll never, not to say it won't feel, it might be greater, but like, at least for now, that sticks out as like one of those mountain peaks in my, emotional, filed cabinet.
Well, I know that you've experienced out of body experiences through yoga, I'm sure, through transcendental meditation, and I know you've dabbled with psychedelics as well at some point.
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely a part of my consciousness exploration. Not saying it's the way to do it, but that certainly led me to experiment. My experimentations with psychedelics at a relatively young age certainly led me into, experimentation with, non-substance related consciousness experiments.
Right, and I think that's what I try to explain to my friends as well. I have friends that are never done anything like that, and I tell them like the psychedelics are kind of like a tool, kind of like grabbing a kid and throwing them inside of a pool and having them learn to swim that way. Like they can learn to swim. They can. They will. They won't.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll start drowning. But
I mean, to take that analogy one step further, I would say that like yes, that's true, but eventually, the sun kind of evaporates that pool. And then you're just kind of standing in an empty pool. And you're like, wait, where, and not unlike all this other stuff, it's kind of, back to the sort of Anthony Bourdain thing. It's like, it eventually dries up, and eventually, all that, if it's kind of a material world thing, it's going to disappear. You think your life is good now, just wait, and you think your life sucks now, just wait. It's all going to fucking change, and sometimes really quick. So I think it's kind of just a matter of being like, I want to throw myself into that pool and learn to swim inside my head. I want to be, in a desert, but in my mind, I'm swimming in that pool, or when I'm in that pool, I want to be out, sunbathing in that desert. And just kind of being able to.
Yeah, go ahead. No,
I'm good, man. I'm good. It's your turn.
Well, I was just gonna say it's one of those. You can achieve those states without the drug.
Yeah,
without taking LSD or without taking mushrooms, you can achieve out of body experiences through meditation and just breathing.
Have you ever seen? I've been really digging deep into Ram Dass lately. Especially since he died. Do you know the YouTube video where he's talking about meeting Neem Karoli Baba for the first time?
I've seen it. I don't remember now word for word, but I've definitely seen it.
So quick paraphrase, he, if everybody, for anybody listening who doesn't know Ram Dass's backstory, he was originally Richard Alpert, and him and Timothy Leary were Harvard professors. And, Richard Alpert was a psychologist, at a Harvard level. So, I mean, he's a pretty smart guy as far as we're concerned, in this. So anyway, they start experimenting with psychedelics, eventually get fired from Harvard. He goes off and kind of does his own thing. They have a big falling out as friends. And I think he just kind of hit one of these like existential crossroads in his life. His mom had just passed away, and he was like, I'm going to India. So he goes to India, and one of his friends is like, I want you to meet my guru. So kind of reluctantly, he's like, sure, let's go. They're driving out there. They pull over at, in the middle of the night or, at night. And he looks up at the sky and he sees kind of the, how does he describe it? Kind of like Vincent Van Gogh Starry Night kind of sky. And he's just like, wow, this is pretty intense. And he's out there thinking about his mom and, just kind of getting sentimental. So the next day he goes to the ashram where Neem Karoli Baba is, situated. And he sees everybody kind of, basically worshiping this guru and touching his feet. And he's just like, I'm not doing this. Like, what is this? I'm a Harvard professor. I'm big shit. And, eventually Neem Karoli Baba, Maharaji, I think his name is, or, one of his other kind of, other
titles,
names, so to speak. Yeah, whatever. So, well, he's like, here, come sit next to me. So he starts talking to Richard Alpert, and he's saying, hey, so what'd you think of those stars last night? And, I'm really sorry to hear about your mom and her spleen disorder. And, Richard Alpert's just like, what the fuck is happening right now? I don't understand, and he's like, as a Harvard professor and a psychologist and everything, like, I was not prepared for that, and that was just some other shit. Yeah. So instantly he was, became Ram Dass, in a sense. He was given that name, pretty shortly after, which basically means like servant of Ram or servant of God. And so it goes on a little bit more, and he's talking about how, in his conversations with, this guru, the guru basically says like, hey, so where's the medicine? Because Ram Dass had brought some acid to India, and he had like pretty heavy dose pills, and he eventually gives, he's like, well, give me some, he chooses to do it. So instead of taking, so instead of taking one pill, he takes all the pills. And Ram Dass is just sitting there kind of like, what is about to happen? And like nothing happens. And he's sitting and he can't believe it. He's like, what? I don't understand. Like, this is enough acid to, like, you know, really screw up like a lot of people. And his takeaway was essentially like, you don't need to take a bus to Detroit if you're already in Detroit.
Yep.
So, you know, it might not be as easy to get there. And, like, you know, you could certainly go through that door and hang out with, you know, some higher level of consciousness, you know, on these drugs, but you can't stay. You know, and eventually you sober up and you're kind of asked to leave, you know, or ushered out, sometimes softly, sometimes not so softly. So I do think that we kind
riskier. It is riskier to go the route of the drugs, you know, because you could get lost.
Yeah.
I've seen people get lost, you know.
Yeah, man. And I mean, I've certainly, without, you know, unpacking too much of this story, like, you know, I've essentially been part of ceremonies where I saw, like, what I would, you know, the only thing I could say is, like, I witnessed an exorcism, and it was one of the most intense things I've ever seen. You know, I saw a shaman suck vomit out of somebody's head and puke for him. It was like, wow. You know, I mean, I don't know. It's a whole other conversation, but, you know, it just kind of leaves me with that, like, I don't know shit about shit. And if you told me that there were giant lizards that walked around 500 million years ago, I wouldn't believe you. You know, that sounds batshit crazy too. Yeah. So I realized that I don't know shit about shit, and just because I haven't seen it doesn't mean it didn't happen. Right. And I think being in that position of, like, well, maybe, I don't know. I think just kind of suspending disbelief like that puts you in a more, I don't know, maybe a safer or more satisfying mindset.
Yeah. That's also risky too, man, because, I mean, that's kind of how we have flat earthers. And not to say that I know the earth is round, but that's how they, like, that's what they believe in. They're like, I can't prove it. I have never seen it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but
so
you know what?
I mean, it is.
I mean, but there's a certain part of it where it's just kind of like, I'm not saying there is no truth. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like, I think you know, I'm pretty certain the world is not flat.
I don't know what shape it is, but it's definitely not flat, bro.
It's kind of like, it's not quite you know, it's not quite a sphere either, but, you know, I'm pretty certain that it's not flat, and I'm pretty sure that dinosaurs existed. You know, there is some proof. And yes, there is something to be said about being able to see and feel and touch things, and some people really do need that. You know, but, you know, it's okay to take a leap of faith. And, you know, I think, you know, there's hold on, I'm actually going to look up this quote that I found recently. It's like a Louis Pasteur, the scientist. It's something like, a little science estranges men from God, but much science leads them back to him. Right. You know, or the idea that, like, faith says I believe, therefore I see. Science says I see, therefore I believe.
Right.
And I think that,
it's all a circle,
you know,
man.
you kind of have to dance around that a little bit. And
time's a flat circle, man.
You know, and I think that your own experience can kind of prove that certain things are true. Yeah. You know, I think most people have an experience of, like, well, the sun rises and sets, and, you know, you can fly around the world, and we've figured out certain things and sent things to the moon, or to, you know, I mean, whether you believe the moon landing was, you know, real or not, we've sent things into space. Like, I think we can all agree on that. We've landed things, we've sent satellites up there, they've returned with pretty amazing photos. I think we can be sure of certain things. I'm not saying that we know everything there is to know about it. I'm not saying that we're not going to figure out that relativity was flawed, but it certainly helped propel science and mathematics and all these things to a new level.
Yeah, and I hope science is getting closer.
You know, but that just proves that we needed it to get to that next point.
For sure. I feel science is definitely getting closer.
I mean, if you've had a pretty intense dream, that feels like a simulation, you know, and, you know, and, or just kind of like, this is some weird, you know, negative land version of real life. But it feels fucking real when you're in it, you know, and I've definitely had dreams where I've, like, swatted it at insects, you know, like a mosquito on me. And I'm like, dude, I know this is a dream, but that was so weird and real. You know, like why would I dream that? You know, it kind of, do you know, like the idea of like the Flatlander? Have you ever heard this kind of story? Basically, like if you were in like a 2-dimensional world, you know, the idea of 3 dimensions is just like hard to perceive. You know, it's just like, I just have to hold space for the fact that like my 3-dimensional brain can't handle that time might not be moving in a linear way. Like, let's say you go back and like make amends with somebody that you wronged. You know, I wouldn't disagree with the idea that it may, in kind of like a Back to the Future, you know, the photo is now the you know, somebody is reappearing in the photo, like that it wouldn't change your present in some way by going back and fixing the past in the future. Does that make any sense? You know, and it's a hard thing to really explain, but just like this idea that like, you know, we're pretty sure there are multiple dimensions beyond just like the 3rd dimension, but our meager, you know, and not to say the brain is anything less than, you know, a pretty fantastic piece of biology, you know, but it's hard for us to perceive these things with our senses, you know, or just like, you know, the idea that like, I know there's other colors out there that insects can see that I just don't have the, you know, rods and cones to perceive. And, you know, that alone puts me in a pretty humble state of like, I mean, I don't know. You know, just because I can't see it or touch it doesn't mean it's not there. You know, and all the things that quantum physics is presenting is pretty wild. You know, and it wouldn't surprise me if you know, an idea like panpsychism, which is that essentially everything is consciousness, that wouldn't be the kind of you know, one of these like Galileo moments of our time. Like at that time, they threw the guy in prison because he said, you know, the Earth wasn't the center of the universe, you know, or center of the solar system. And, you know, right now we're like, panpsychism, everything has consciousness. That's bad shit crazy. And it's kind of like, well, maybe it isn't. I don't know. There's a lot of pretty smart people out there that are saying, hey, you know, it might not make sense now, but maybe it is. You know, Einstein was saying that, you know, gravity should stretch space-time in certain ways. And people were like, nah, it doesn't make any sense. And now all of a sudden we have the computers, then the technology and the hardware to be like, well, he was kind of onto something. And I also think it's, you know, it's a real slippery slope to get wrapped up into this technology thing too. Like it is cool, you know, and all this stuff is cool. And like all the things are, you know, I'm blessed and, you know, it's such a great opportunity for me to be able to have, you know, make art with people in other nations overseas in a different time zone, you know? But at the same time, like, I think it's kind of like a both and as opposed to an either or. I don't think that technology is necessarily making us smarter. I don't think that technology means that we are more evolved than the Egyptians may have been who designed the pyramids. You know, I think we might be technologically advanced, but kind of emotionally and spiritually kind of lacking, you know, in that what's the movie that everybody talks about where it's kind of like the guy gets put into a government thing and he's supposed to wake up like, you know, a few years later, and he wakes up like, you know, thousands of years later. And
Idiocracy.
I mean, it's like, I do think in some ways we are getting stupider and the world is like kind of going to shit in some way. And not to say that there aren't amazing things happening. You know, and there's a lot of people who are really, you know, technology is great. It helps people, you know, in so many ways, but it also kind of, you know, it's a double-edged sword. You know, and science is really cool, you know, like, but, you know, ultimately something like biology is just kind of like naming things, you know, and it's kind of just discovering what's already out there. And it's like, it's really cool that we can talk about like how, you know, reproduction happens, but until science can like, you know, create a seed, then I don't think it's really doing everything yet, you know, and I don't think that like science should replace other things until like, I mean, science may tell us how to like create a seed bank, but I don't think science is ever going to actually create from scratch something that never existed as amazing as like a sequoia pine cone.
I don't know, man. Have you seen 3D printers these days? No, I'm kidding.
You know what I'm saying, though. And then it's fantastic. I'm not saying that there's any, you know, that, but it's just like, I think that some people kind of think that science is going to kind of replace that sort of, that factor of infinity, or that little sliver of something that we can't quite pinpoint. If that makes it.
I agree with you completely, man. To me, it's all about balance. I think we need to have a little bit of everything. I know it sounds, hippy dippy, whatever you want to call it, but it's
guilty as charged.
Need a little bit of everything. Yeah, I love everything, and it pisses people off. Like I have friends, I'm like, oh, dude, you check out this song. They're like, that shit sucks. How could you listen to that? And I'm like, because I don't care, dude. It sounds good. I'm not here to be an elitist anymore. Like maybe when I was younger, I was in high school. I was just kind of a dork, but. Like as I get older, I want everything, man. I want to travel. Yeah. I want to travel. Well, I want to have technology.
It's that both and, not either or. I think being an adult and being a mature human being is having a good relationship with the idea of cognitive dissonance. You can have two opposing thoughts in your brain at the same time and not have to choose one all the time. And, I could be wrong here, but I heard something somewhere about the word balance coming from the root word bilar. Maybe it's like a Latin root that essentially, or some conjunction, or I think it's like etymology. Maybe that's the study of insects. I could be totally wrong, but basically, like whatever the, it's something along those lines. I could be, how meta would it be for me to mess up the idea of words in this conversation? But my point is simply, I'm pretty sure the root of balance comes from the same word that may have been the word for dance. So it's not about standing in the middle of the scale or standing in the middle of that like seesaw fulcrum. It's kind of about, like you're on a surfboard and you're kind of just trying to dance a little bit to maintain that balance. And it's not like a still Zen-like balance. It's like you're flowing. And I think that that's kind of what you're speaking to. It's like, I can just like what I like, and I can kind of like everything, or just kind of be like, well, that's just not for me right now, but maybe one day I will want to turn on Christian radio just to feel something refreshing that isn't like, always, some crazy Satanist metal, and maybe I just need a palate cleanser every once in a while. I don't know. But I'm not going to poo-poo it just because I don't get it. That becomes a problem with me. Like the last thing I need to do is just like become more of a white dad, Yeah. It's like I'm already struggling with it enough. Give me, I need to kind of hack my own tendencies here.
Well, it's true, man, and that's why I'm so attracted to music in general, because you're kind of surfing on whatever vibe that music is putting out, whatever it is.
Yeah,
you're balancing yourself out in that wave of that music or dancing. You mentioned dance, and one of the weirdest times of my life was when I actually started going to dance school for a. Latinos like to have really big organized dances for their daughters, like 15.
Yeah, was it called quinceañera? Yeah.
Yeah. So they were like, hey, you're going to be in this quinceañera, so you're going to have to learn how to dance. So I started going to these classes, and dude, I got it on such a level that it was, obviously I'm showing up with like Metallica shirts, so the class was weirded out, like what are you doing here? And then, but once you get it, it's all about staying in that balance with your partner, because it was you and your lady, and you're doing moves, and it's like coordinated moves, and
I mean, it's yoga, man. It's just kind of a different form of yoga. It's just kind of like you kind of have to get into your body sometimes. I think it's really easy, and this is where that technology thing kind of bites at us, is like we're so stuck in our brains. Most of our activity feels like it's like in my hands and my brain, and otherwise I'm just fucking sitting on a couch. And I'm just kind of passively engaging with my life by watching TV or being entertained by whatever's in my phone at the moment. But like yoga and like putting my phone down, or, dancing and just kind of being in my body a little bit and letting my mind kind of do its thing. Back to even those final Dillinger shows, I don't like and kind of couldn't by the end of it stand still. In the beginning of Dillinger, I had to kind of force myself to have a little bit of stage presence. I was like, I remember having conversations with Ben when I joined the band, like, how do I, prioritize playing and moving, because if I'm playing, to my best, then I'm not moving as freely. And if I'm moving too freely, then I'm not playing my best. And ultimately I just realized you kind of have to do both, and sometimes you're focused on the playing and other times you're focused on moving. And, in the beginning I was really conscious about both. And then by the end, it was like, I couldn't even think about either or else I'd lose it.
Yeah.
And it was
happening.
It just kind of became like its own form of meditation, its own form of yoga, by just getting up there and trying not to think. The second I started thinking about something, or the second I would be like, oh, this next part's kind of hard, I would 1,000% of the time blow it. If I just kind of would, and then instead I would just try to focus at least, if I had to focus on something, it would just be like, just focus on your breathing, bro. And then if I focus on my breathing and didn't hold my breath, like I'm a, fight or flight panic about this next part, then I would probably nail it.
Yeah. It's all about the breathing when it comes to those situations too, man.
Always.
Yeah. If you're having like a panic attack or an anxiety, I get them every once in a while now because I have been slipping on my meditating practices. Like I know what I need to do to fix it, but I've been so busy trying to make things happen that I've realized I've lost my time to zen out, and meditate. So I get them every once in a while, and the way I get out of it is just breathing. Just breathe. Just stop for a second, take a deep breath, and just focus on that breath, and things will naturally happen there.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the beautiful thing about mindfulness practices is like, dude, you breathe you're breathing constantly, whether you're thinking about it or not. But when you actually think about it, it changes things, focusing on your breathing is like, I don't know. I mean, that's just such a key, just such a sharp tool in my tool. I should say it's a dull tool in my toolbox that I'm constantly trying to sharpen. But yeah, I mean, that is it. A lot of it just comes down to that. So yeah.
Well, that's great, man. Are you having, I know you're super busy. I mean, you're busier than I am. So you have time to meditate? You're finding the time?
I try. I mean, as my grandmother used to say, if you want to get something done, ask a busy person. So I'm trying to stay busy. And I'm going to sound like a real freak, but I've been trying to get up at like 5 a.m. most days and try to get a meditation practice in. Because, like I said, I'm a dad, and if I don't get up like early, I don't get anything done. And I do have like a 9-to-5 job at the moment. Not every day of the week. I save some time for music and just kind of, like today. I need some time for my own sanity and just to make sure that I'm not neglecting my other interests and passions. But anyway, yeah, I've been trying to get up really early and increasingly earlier to get stuff done. And that's the only time I can do like meditation practice is if I get up like pretty damn early and do yoga and meditation before my daughter wakes up. So yeah, I mean, I try to like, even when I'm driving, I'm trying to do some kind of like mindfulness practice or some kind of, some form of meditation, whether it's like even, chanting japa, that kind of stuff is like, I find that to be really, kind of like watering the roots as opposed to the fruits.
Right.
I find that my meditation practice, all the things that I worry about, all the things that I feel like I need to get done and obsess about and, have all these, anxieties about, like if I'm just kind of focused on my meditation, all that other stuff just kind of seems to fall in place. Including all the manifestation of just like, opportunities and career stuff. It's like, I don't sit around and like think about it. I just try to like play my bass, and make that my meditation and make that like a form of yoga. And again, it's just something where like, if I don't get up and do it early, chances are I'm not going to get it done. And it means going to bed earlier, but it just is like, I mean, if I'm up past like, 10 o'clock most nights, like what am I really doing? I'm probably, not to say there aren't like great things to entertain myself with, but like, I'm probably going to just be like dipping into some like not the healthiest practices, or you know what I'm saying? It can derail quick. And again, that makes me sound pretty boring and like talk about being, cis white dad, but guilty as charged. That's just kind of where I am right now. And, so.
No, I think you're doing the right thing, man. I mean, getting up early is the key. I think I need to switch to that.
Yeah, it's kind of an auspicious time. I mean, this is the other downfall of, having members of a band that are all European where like, my wife might be like, who's texting you right now? It's fucking 5 a.m. I'm like, well, everybody in Europe is up and it's 11 a.m. for them. So I'm like, may I remind you that not everybody is on Eastern Standard Time.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, so that's even a thing. Like now I have to wake up and try not to look at my phone, and try not to get wrapped up into like whatever is happening. Yeah,
that's a struggle. That's a struggle.
Yeah.
That's the first thing I do these days when I wake up is like, oh, look at that. My phone's blown up. And it's
hard. I mean, that is
stuff,
Yeah, but, I mean, it all is important, and it will be when I get to it. But like that alone is like a meditation, to just, kind of abstain in some way from that. It'd be like even if it's like I'm going to wake up and I'm going to meditate for 20 minutes before I do anything. And I 99% of those notifications can wait and don't expect me to be up for like another 4 hours. So I can just put it on pause, and that's kind of, I know a lot of other people like staying up and getting work done until like 2 or 3 in the morning. Same thing,
I want to get on that farmer schedule. I feel like they got it right. Like wake up when the sun wakes up. How about that? If the sun's out, time to get up.
And same thing, I know that like, for example, when I go camping, the sun goes down and, by like 8:30 or 9 o'clock, I'm kind of cooked. And I just kind of want to get in the tent, and of course it means that I've had just an exciting full day. But like when I'm outside and not in my house and not around, when I'm just in like natural light and natural darkness and not around like a bunch of LEDs and fluorescents and CFLs and all, yada, 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 I find that my circadian rhythm like falls in sync. And, I kind of feel like I'm like doing myself a disservice trying to stay up. And, again, some people just have that, that's just the way that they're wired. They get everything done, from 11 p.m. till 3 a.m. And that works for some people. But I've always just kind of been an early bird. You can put me to bed at almost any time. And even, now I'm kind of in the rhythm of waking up early, so I don't even need an alarm most nights. But left to my own devices, even on tour, and I'm pretty sure everybody in my bands will, attest to this. Like, I'm always up at like 7, no matter what. And, maybe a little later, but like I'm almost always the first one up. So it's just kind of how I'm wired. And now I'm just like, okay, I may as well use that time when things are relatively quiet.
Yeah, that's good. I think I need to start doing that myself, man, because I've been getting up early naturally, and I have my alarm set for work. And I'll end up waking up, and then I'll end up checking the phone, and then kind of trying to stretch in bed. I've been doing these like weird stretches in bed where I put my legs up and then like pull back on pull the leg down and press up against the knee, just do little yoga stretches in bed. And then I always end up passing out again though.
Right.
And then waiting for my alarm to go off. And when the alarm goes off, then I get up and start doing other things. But I should just, when I first wake up, I should get out of bed and start doing shit. Otherwise I'm just going to stay there,
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not sure, it's kind of a bug and a feature depending on what night or morning we're talking about. But like, I've never been able to fall back to sleep. Like if my daughter is up at 3 a.m. and it wakes me up, I'm like, I'm screwed. Like I typically have a really hard time falling back to sleep. So like I said, I'm just kind of wired that way. I mean, so for me, like getting out of bed, like and part of it's just like maybe having a little, I don't know, not like mental anxiety, but just like, I just have a lot of energy in the morning. I love coffee, but I'm just kind of gilding the lily with it. I need to kind of get up and do some yoga and stuff and like burn off some of that excess energy.
Sure.
I've heard it said like emotion needs motion, and I'm like, already pretty wired, and like if I don't do some yoga, like I notice myself being like kind of critical and nitpicky about little things, and I might like, not like, I kind of, have a tendency to think that I've got the best way of doing things. So, whether it's freaking cooking an egg or whatever, I just kind of be like, well, I don't know. I'm gonna unpack a lot more of my own daily struggles with being in a domestic partnership.
Right.
But yeah.
No, it's cool, man. I think you're doing the right thing. I want to do that. I think I'm going to start doing that and just get up when my body wakes up and not, wait for the alarm and just focus on getting shit done. I do tend to stay up late sometimes to get shit done, but that's with the podcast, just trying to edit shit and get things ready.
Yeah, I mean, again, there's that dance. Like some days you kind of have to do that, and some days I'm up later. Some days I'm going to go and see my friends play at a venue, and I'm going to hang out a little later. My friends are in town. It's just like, it's not always going to be that way. But if I get in the rhythm of that, then that's the wagon I'm going to jump back on, and it's okay to fall off. You're supposed to fall off. But, the idea is just kind of getting back on.
Yeah. Kind of a personal question. You mentioned your daughter. How old is she now?
She's 5.
5. Is
5
this
and some change, but yeah.
Okay. The math is not there. I was gonna say, is this your first kind of like big, long tour away, but I mean, it seems like you've been on a couple tours already since then.
Yeah, I mean, I've done a couple, 3-4 weekers. Some other stuff that like, without unpacking all this, like some stuff that I can't even necessarily talk about or don't want to talk about. Some gigs I've done where I've been out on tour and I don't really advertise when I'm out doing it. So yeah, I mean, I've been away, since the Dillinger thing ended. Yeah. I mean, I think I've been away like 2 or 3 times for maybe, 3 to 4 weeks, and it's tough. I mean, I don't enjoy it. That is the, like, that kind of, I think a lot about like the Bhagavad Gita, when this kind of stuff comes up. I don't know if you're familiar with the storyline there. So, it's just kind of like, that's my dharma. And sometimes you have to go fight, and sometimes you have to do things you don't want to do. And there's always going to be a trade-off, and you have to just be okay with the consequences of some of your things. And, there's never always going to be a clean way of doing things. There's always going to be some trade-off. So in order for me to go do what I think I need to do in life, I may have to, my family may have to sacrifice, and I may have to sacrifice being a dad to go be a musician. And sometimes I may have to sacrifice being a musician because I need to be a dad.
Yep.
Or want to be a dad. And
that's good that you want to be a dad.
Yeah, I mean, anybody who's had even the slightest taste of a messed up childhood, didn't see enough of their parents or doesn't have the greatest relationship with their parents, understands why I don't always just want to be on tour doing that. As much as I love it.
Yeah, man. That's kind of why I haven't had kids yet myself. It's just, I know that right now I wouldn't be happy doing what I'm doing. I'd be focused on that. And it's not like I need to focus on what I'm doing right now just so that I can do that later financially. You know what I mean? I definitely want to do it at some point. It's just right now it's not the time. And I some people have the ability to do so. I'm not there yet. But I commend you, man. Like, I get it completely.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, it was kind of a little bit of both. Where, I'm, have been in a, loving, committed relationship for 10 years, and our daughter was, not a complete surprise, but a little bit of a surprise, and but it was great. It was kind of like, this is not surprising. This is a good time for this to happen, and I've got 9 months to kind of come to terms with that existential windshield of like, how's my life going to change? And then, it moves, the days are long and the years are short. And as it's going, I'm kind of learning, I'm always a little bit behind it, but it kind of trains me as I go. And she's kind of like guruing me as I go. to be a better dad and to figure it out and then figure out how to strike that balance between like, you know, work responsibilities and family responsibilities. And, you know, and I'm trying to just figure out how to, I know that sometimes I take big withdrawals out of that emotional bank account. So I'm just trying to find ways to put big deposits in when I have the opportunity. You know, when I go on tour,
What a good way to put it.
yeah, like when I go on tour, I know I'm taking a big withdrawal, but when I'm home from tour, I want to try to be as present as I can. So speaking
That's
of,
awesome,
I hate to cut this off, but I hear that my family just came home. So
no, I was about to say, man, I know you're busy and I appreciate the amount of time you've given me. I mean, I know that like just we've been talking about how much shit you got going on. So
hey, man, well,
I appreciate your time.
I really appreciate, you know, the opportunity to talk about some of this stuff freely and openly, you know, to have a platform to, you know, spit some of these ideas and concepts and questions and concerns and, you know, daydreams about life with somebody who, you know, has, you know, sort of smells what I'm stepping in is, you know, it's a great opportunity and I appreciate what you do.
Awesome, man. Well, you know, the door's always open. Anytime you have free time, you want to, you know, talk some more, we can do that. So
I'll call you this time tomorrow.
Everyone listening, please, you know, check out the Azusa album. It's awesome. It's so unique. I put it on every time, and it's stuff that I've never heard. I'll put it to you that way. Like it doesn't sound redundant, you know.
Yeah, I'll make sure I send you a link to the, you know, to a preview of the new one.
Nice.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, check them out, Azusa. Also, if you have the opportunity to catch Devin Townsend with Liam, do it. Go out there. It's going to be a unique Are you guys coming to LA at all? No, right?
As of right now, no. But who knows? You know, it sounds... the only thing I'm booked for is Europe this summer.
Right,
but,
right.
You know, like I said, hopefully, you know, hopefully I have the opportunity to do that too, but we'll see.
Well, guys that are listening in Europe, I do have a few. I see the numbers. I want to shout out to them, and also Brazil for some reason is listening a lot. So thank you guys. Muito obrigado, as they say.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, man, thanks a lot. And yeah, like I said, doors open. Whenever you want to talk, we can do an episode.
Great, man. I'm glad to hear you're doing well. Right. And yeah, we'll talk soon.
Cheers.